want to start this podcast because we miss one another dearly, and we typically see each other at least once a year, and have been for the last almost, 10 years. Since you went to Newfoundland and explored a career path, and fell in love with not only the island but your beautiful wife Jill, and now with baby. And so yeah, like I think we want to start this podcast, one because of our passion for photography, but also because the way we communicate through our photos to one another. We wanted to open up another platform for us to kind of like express ourselves. Would you say that is correct?
Yeah, that's perfect. Uh, I think COVID-19 has forced us to communicate digitally, so this is a great way to
Yeah,
start it up. Yeah,
exactly. It kind of like, because if we think about it, it really, COVID's really like kept us indoors, but like I think it's really kept us away from communicating with people. A lot of people have definitely found ways to communicate with their friends and stuff like that. But when you have a friend that lives at a distance, it's a bit hard to, you know, give them attention and really still keep that friendship connected. And that's why I think this podcast is a great idea, because it keeps us connected, it keeps us sane, it keeps us communicating, uh, and distances can sometimes ruin friendships, but we've been able to keep communication open quite well. Uh, but I think the podcast, yeah, is going to be a great way for us to express ourselves, and express our photography through voice. So yeah, I think that's kind of our intro, but our intro is more or less as kind of comes along the lines of, there are photography podcasts out there that are kind of either talking about gear, or they're talking about, uh, I don't know, the process of photography, or how to take an image, or gear reviews on podcasts. Which I think you and I are both of kind of like, we spent I spent 5 years in the camera industry, as a camera salesperson. You spent a little bit longer in the camera sales industry than I did, but I think we're pretty dry, and we're pretty tapped out of talking about camera reviews and reading them and all that stuff.
definitely, and it's a very interesting sector of YouTube and Twitter and other social media platforms where people just do a great job reviewing particular gear. Um, like the usual suspects like Peter McKinnon or those people. They do a great job in incorporating amazing filmmaking skills and cinematography, and while you're reviewing a little 360 camera, so it's pretty incredible what they're doing. So I don't think we need to tap into that because it's already done really well. I think it'd be better to have just strictly audio podcast talking about photos and the types of projects that we might be working into, or just simply chatting about what we're doing in our lives while we're disconnected through geography and pandemic.
Exactly, and that's kind of leads to my question about ourselves. Let's introduce ourselves to our hopefully prospective audience that is going to be hopefully listening to us in the future. This is a bit of a janky podcast, and hopefully it gets better over time. But we got to start somewhere. So why don't you start off by introducing yourself? Just who you are, where you're from, where you live, what you're doing currently, and we'll go from there.
Yes, sure, sounds good. Yeah, hopefully we garner some sort of following, and hopefully they come back to this original podcast to see what it was all about at the start. My name is Mark. I'm from Northern Ontario, so pretty much in the middle of it in a little place called Chapleau, and then I moved on to Sudbury, Ontario, a much larger town, and lived there for the majority of my teenage years. And then moved on to Ottawa, Ontario, to pursue my studies at Carleton University. There, I acquired a history degree, which I really fell in love with at the end of high school, and kind of thinking that I was going to pursue a career in the federal government in some sort of department. That was kind of where everybody was headed. But with uh, with meeting several interesting people at Carleton, I joined the film society where we would watch very interesting films. Got introduced to a lot of interesting filmmakers like Stanley Kubrick, Kurosawa, Bergman, etc. So I fell in love with cinema at that point, uh, and eventually photography because of these great movies and how they were filmed. I got really interested in the way they were photographed. So then I joined. So then I kind of got a little bit more and more interested in photography. And then I got a job at Henry's, which it's only a retail store, but at the end of the day, met some great people there, which I still keep in contact with, including the co-host here, Alex. And Henry's brought me to Newfoundland in 2010, where I opened up the store here in St. John's, Newfoundland. Unfortunately, the store closed in 2016. So through a great 6 years of the store here, meeting lots of great people, and most importantly, my wife Jill, um, I then had to find another career. So I decided to jump into education and became junior high school teacher, history, English, and then fell in love with special education. So that's where I currently am, special education teacher in a variety of different schools in Newfoundland, specifically around the Avalon Peninsula, and currently very happy with my wife Jill. We have a 1-year-old daughter named Ivy, 4 beautiful cats, and I try to take as many pictures as I possibly can. It's me.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. And I think I followed a different career path, uh, and uh, yeah. So like for me, I was born in Ottawa and grew up in Ottawa. And then I uh, went to school here, did some post secondary stuff, and then I eventually wound up at Henry's, much like yourself, and that's where we met each other and became friends, and then worked my way through the industry in terms of had my own business for a little while in photography, doing weddings and portraits. I worked for a company doing school portraits. I discovered many different things about photography that I had never dreamt about learning, and kind of just settled in that way into photography and loved doing landscape and street photography. Um, and then several years later, wound up at Best Buy, working part time while I was in school, learned to become a travel agent in 2017, and then I met my current partner, uh, my current and only for the future partner, Sarah. She's awesome, and we have 3 beautiful children together. Um, and yeah, and now I'm no longer a travel agent due to the pandemic. I lost my job in April of 2020. So don't know when you're going to be listening to this, but in 2020 there was obviously a pandemic, and I lost my job due to the lack of people traveling. People just aren't traveling as much as we thought they would, or not that they thought we would. They're just not traveling. It's people with pandemic and people close proximity and planes and uh, cruise ships. People just don't want to travel. So I unfortunately lost my job, but it made me rethink my career path and uh, made me think about a couple different things. So now I'm back at Best Buy, working in the Geek Squad department. So I now work on computers, and it's reinvigorated my passion for computers and the technology behind them. And maybe you're going to pursue a career in IT. So we shall see what the future holds for myself. I take pictures when I can, uh, of my kids, things around the house, around the neighborhood. Um, and yeah, so that's me in a nutshell, Alex. You know, uh, yeah, that's about it. So intros are kind of an awkward thing right off the bat to try and introduce yourself to an audience that does not exist, or or is going to exist at some time in the future. Um, I guess we kind of already explained why we're doing the podcast. Uh,
Yeah, I'd say, yeah, like, just to keep in touch, communicate with each other,
exactly.
possibly talk about projects, talk about who's inspiring us. And what's kind of funny that you brought up, well, not funny, I guess it's unfortunate, but a lot of people had to choose a different career path because of the pandemic, because they may have lost their jobs. And I've always thought about photography being a very unique field during the pandemic, where a lot of people are, a lot of people tend to think that it is a good undertaking in a pandemic, especially if you are doing landscapes or street photography, because it's something that you can still do because you're outdoors, you're social distancing, and it's a good pastime. But at the same time, we know of so many people who do it for a living, uh, have had to take other jobs because they lost all of their clients for the year, or at least the weddings or portrait sessions were at least delayed, but there was no income, so they did have to find another employment for the time being. So I've seen that a lot in photographers in Newfoundland.
yeah, it's brutal.
I don't,
It's
I don't,
brutal.
I'm not sure if you've seen the same thing in Ottawa.
Oh yeah, totally. Like I've
Yeah.
seen complete photographers just like empty out their entire like gear closet, or there's been even a couple of studios that have had to sell their entire studio because they just can't keep clients in. And it also says something as well how you manage your business as well. Not that to talk down to those people who had businesses, but you know if uh, if you were going day to day, doing photography or for portraits or clients, whatever it may be in your studio, and you have to sell the studio due to the fact of lack of clients. It's kind of like you might want to rethink your business a little bit. But that being said, it's still sad because then it's one less person you can go to. It's one less competition that's out there, and competition drives business. So it's sad all around. Definitely Ottawa has been hit hard for sure. Like a big thing for our city is politics, and with the lack of politicians meeting up at Parliament Hill, and uh, it's very hard for journalists to really keep a job because there's no one there for them to photograph. There's no big events. There's no opening of new buildings. There's no crowds. Like there's no news scrims like there used to be when the budget was released. There's some reporters at a distance. And typically there's only like one from each news agency. Some. So it's been tough in the city. Also, major teams, sports teams, our football, the Grey Cups, the CFL's been canceled, so there's no football for sports photographers or hockey for that matter. So the Ottawa Senators aren't playing, so it's been a tough year for photographers in the city for sure, and across the globe. It's been very tough. But photographers are finding a way to get creative, stay employed, self-employed. Um, they're working around the pandemic and its requirements for photography in particular, or just gig people. The gig industry has been really hit hard for like musicians, like your brother. Your brother's a musician, so it's been very hard for him as well, I would imagine. Uh, and yeah,
Yeah, definitely. It's hard for anyone who maybe some part of their income they relied on playing a performance, like my brother, or stand-up comic. Any of
Yeah,
these
huge.
types of gigs, they were hit quite hard. And I mean, in Newfoundland, it's only maybe a handful of top photographers who are still getting a decent amount of work, but the ones that were drudging along, doing weddings and family sessions, some have made it work and have great guidelines in place due to the pandemic. But I know that some of them had to end up selling insurance on the phone. Like, you got to do what you got to do to pay the bills. So it's unfortunate that a lot of these creatives were forced to do something that they may not have had to do in normal times. But again, this will end at some point, and hopefully they get back to it.
Yeah, and it's we're hopefully in the future it'll get better. We hope that it gets better. Obviously, unfortunately, within Canada, winters are very long, and hopefully the pandemic doesn't stick around for much longer. Although it's hard to see the light at the end of the tunnel, but it's one of those things where you just gotta keep going through and gotta keep powering through it. But I also think it's also created a unique sense of unique uh, visual storytelling of work as well, because I've seen some photographers and photojournalists um, photograph the pandemic, and it's been interesting to see their take, their vision, and even the stories of people who you learn of some people who really have had to take it hard, like some small businesses in around my neighborhood in particular, have had to close down due to the pandemic, and it's really hard to see, uh, those businesses close down and not keep their staff employed, and maybe they were photographers at some point. Obviously those small businesses, depending on what they were doing, were taking pictures of their food, so they either had an on-staff photographer who was doing some photography while they bartended and they lost their job. So it's really unfortunate that
Hmm.
this pandemic's done. But we got to keep the hope, keep the faith. Hopefully there's an end in sight at some point. Hopefully we'll see it. Um,
Yeah, definitely. And I guess from the perspective of this province, we've had a different reality where we uh, we are an island and we are a little bit more insulated compared to the rest of the country, at least. Um, so COVID-19 is a it's a fear. It's a real fear, but it hasn't hit us hard as well. We're probably one of the safest areas in the world, I'd say, at this point, um, where we've initiated uh, very strict travel restrictions and guidelines. You could argue on both sides that they are bad or good for Newfoundland, but it's definitely kept our public health in top shape, even though we're getting more and more into debt, and we weren't at a good in a good situation before the pandemic. So there's that part of it, but I feel like in the photography sphere, there aren't many people that are doing work that are related to the pandemic because again, it's a thing that's distant right here. I feel that we're insulated. We only get a couple cases a week due to rotational workers that work out in Alberta. So we've been lucky thus far. Um, that might change very quickly if you get an outbreak that you can't control. But we've been lucky. But I haven't seen any artistic expression based on the pandemic in Newfoundland, at least in the photography world.
yeah, I've seen it a bit here in the city. I can't. I know I've seen them. I just can't rack my head around what photographer it was. But there was a photographer here in the city that did take it upon themselves to photograph some people who had lost their businesses and kind of like did environmental portraits with inside their homes and like what it's been like to like call lawyers, call uh, bankers, and call like their lenders and all that stuff, and like you just see the stress that's mounting on those people, um, and it's very hard to see those images, but I think it's a great piece of journalism for one, but also visual storytelling. Um, which is, and I'm sure that those people that are being photographed, kind of see the idea. Um, but I think it's a great way for us to feel like, hey, you know what? Maybe we should have spent a couple extra bucks, on that small business down the road. Maybe it's a great way to like keep it in the forefront of your mind to think small business, keep it local. Um, but yeah, I thought it was a piece of art as well, just because the photos were so fantastic and just perspectives I'd never thought about before. So yeah, um,
That's that. Yeah, that's something I'd like to see. I'd like to check out. Yeah,
yeah, I gotta find it.
yeah. I gotta send me a link to that. I feel like here, like you know, people are still taking pictures of their row houses and landscapes, and it's it still doesn't feel too real here. Feels like we're just back to status quo. Um, it's I would probably get in trouble by not saying it. There are some businesses that are shutting down. It is hurting the economy a lot. A lot of people are losing their jobs in other industries, but um, because of our tourism, uh, our department of tourism is so um, very capable at what they're doing, especially in any year. So they had the stay home year for this year, and Newfoundlanders and Labradorians really um, took it upon themselves to visit their own province. And, we actually did okay. Like the economy did fine in regards to tourism, and people were booking accommodations left and right, and it was nearly impossible to find a hotel room anywhere on the island because everyone had rented something, and the prices went up. And so I'm glad because it was good for the especially for the small towns outside of St. John's that rely on tourism to survive. It was good that we went out to visit our own island.
Yeah, it's just great because I think when you and I took a trip last year around the island a little bit, um, and we discovered that some people in the smaller communities had not traveled outside of the communities and not, had been to other parts of the island, which we found kind of interesting and kind of funny at the same time. So it's kind of nice to see that they this is the year that what, hey, we're stuck here. Let's not go to Punta Cana. Let's visit another part of the island that we haven't seen before, or just to get out and do something. Because like when you're stuck inside, it's different. Like if you're like in your community and you're like, huh, yeah, I could go there, but I just don't want to. But because the pandemic's kind of like forced you to stay inside, you're like, huh, I don't want to stay around here anymore. I want to go somewhere else. It's kind of
Yeah,
interesting the dynamic.
it is. Yeah, it's there are Newfoundlanders who do travel a lot across the island and check it out, but there's a lot that don't bother. And uh, this year was really a time where they can see corners of the island that they had never seen before and take it all in. Yeah, no, it's been interesting that way. Kind of the silver lining, able to get out and see their own backyard and spend money in their own backyard and keep the economy going. If we have to struggle through this for another year, I think we'll get out of it not completely unscathed, but a little bit better than we had thought originally. Um, it'll be interesting to see what happens next summer if we're stuck here again. And I'm sure the weather didn't help. People wanted to get out as much as possible because if there are any people out there who listen to our podcast in the future and don't know what Newfoundland is all about, people don't come here for the weather. So um, it's yeah, it's about I'd say about 10 months of terrible weather and 2 months of okay weather.
Yeah, it can get quite cold as I've experienced. Not I haven't been there during a complete snowstorm or any snowstorm, but it's definitely a 1 minute it can be sunny and like 14, 15 degrees, and the next minute it could be like -8 and it's raining and hail sideways.
And it's not to take anything away from the brutally cold winters that Alex has to experience every winter in Ottawa.
Yeah, the valley's quite cold. It's
So we both live in very terrible places on Earth that.
Yeah, exactly.
in regards to
We we
weather. Yeah.
we have such huge swings in weather. It can be like plus 45 and minus 45. It's
Yeah.
we I think we
We
have one of
we
the craziest swings in temperature here. Like throughout the year, it's quite crazy.
Yeah, we thankfully don't have those crazy minus 40 days because we have a little bit of help from the ocean, but the ocean brings other negative aspects like 100-kilometer-hour winds and a lot of things hitting your face every day.
Yeah. Oh man, I do miss the weather though. I do. Some days it's quite bland here in Ottawa. Sometimes I'd like some fog once in a while.
Yes, well, it's funny because when I lived in Ottawa as well, and um, going back there once or twice a year in normal times, I'm actually inspired by going back to Ottawa because it's a large city in comparison to what you have in Newfoundland, and it's a different. It's just a different feel, a different vibe, especially when it comes to street photography or even landscape. Um, so it's fun to go back there to kind of refuel your juices for inspiration.
For sure. Like I mean, it's definitely changed for sure. Like the downtown core itself is quite quiet. It's definitely not as lively as it used to be. A lot of condos are empty because people have decided that they don't want to live in high rises anymore. They want to live in a house where they don't have to see their significant other. It's kind of interesting how the COVID's kind of changed the dynamic of people living in condos. People don't want to be downtown where there's no life anymore. Or we've kind of come back to a little bit of life a little bit with restaurants kind of being quasi open. Uh, but people don't want to be downtown because there's not really much life downtown as much as there used to be. So you've got people
Um,
who are moving from the city core to the suburbs, which is great. It's weird dynamic, but that's a whole like other podcast. But yeah, it's definitely quite an
yeah, that's
interesting look for sure. It's like quiet in the streets, so it's definitely a different look for the city of Ottawa. Definitely from what you remember for sure.
yeah, I'm sure. And it's funny because now Newfoundland is seeing a huge increase in ex-Newfoundlanders coming back and moving to the island just because they feel like it's safer here. There's more room. You know, real estate is more reasonably affordable compared to the big cities. So it's a pandemic shifts things in an interesting way. So it's kind of interesting to see and live through it.
Yeah, and it's definitely a an interesting scenario to be in for sure in this town. It's yeah, I would love to be anywhere else but here. But I guess that's how we both feel. It's just an interesting take on. I think that's how it always is, though. You'd rather be somewhere else than where you are. And I think that goes to see, even if I'm sure if I lived in Milan in Italy, I'd be the same way. I'd be like, yeah, I'm tired of Milan. I want to be somewhere else.
Oh yeah, I'm sure because you live through it and you've lived there your whole life and you're used to everything. Um, and I feel like and I'm sure it's a terrible experience for anyone who's having fairly severe mental health issues during a pandemic because of the isolation. Um, but for me personally, I'm just craving just a back to normalcy. Like for us, we have our movie theaters reopened, and just simply going back to a movie is going to be, um, it's going to make me very happy by just not being able to do it for 6, 8, 10 months. It's going to be interesting to go back to normal slowly but surely.
Yeah, it would. I would love to go back to a movie theater. I'd love to see a movie in theaters. There's a few that are projected to come out, but yeah, it's just the current status. It's not going to work. But you know what? I think for mental health issues, I think a lot of people have kind of turned to photography. Uh, they've decided to pick up a camera, get them outside, get into the nature or the streets to take pictures. And I feel like in some ways, like I took a bit of time off when I got let go from a CAA as the company that I worked for as a travel agency. And when I left, when I was let go, sorry, uh, I decided to one stay home and help my partner take care of the kids, but also to take some time to myself and take pictures. Um, and I felt like I took a lot of photos and got really into it. Changed my course a little bit with my camera gear, which happens, I don't know, every 3 or 4 years, I find. Uh, but yeah, I think s- being stuck indoors kind of forced me to go outdoors more so than I ever thought I would, for sure. I'm sure it's a lot of people have kind of moved to that as well, or some other creative outlet.
Yeah, definitely, especially in our neck of the woods where from November to April it's dark early, it's cold, you don't necessarily want to go outdoors often, but whatever creative outlet you choose, photography or painting or just writing or even doing a podcast, um, definitely helps in all avenues because you have to keep yourself busy. And I think a pandemic like this makes you reflect on what you're doing in life and who you should be reconnecting with, and maybe trying to make progress in your physical health and your mental health. Um, so on that end of it, there could be a lot of pluses and bonuses if we come out of this um, on the other side. You'll be, I think, healthier in some way, not for everyone, but for a good chunk of us, I think it's gonna help us go through tougher times because this is COVID-19 is our generation's um, our war. It's basically our war, like a World War II or a Vietnam War. Or, it's something very traumatic. Obviously, not going through the same heartache as those people did, but it's our big, um, your most substantial event that's happened in our lives. On in a from a perspective of chaos and death and economies destroyed. Um, Come out of this better on the other side. I think we're going to be just stronger people overall.
Completely agree. And kind of going back to what you were saying in terms of mental health and photography. Um, One of the things that I was reading up on, which was like to come across like to do a project or something to keep your mind like active and to feel like it's to make yourself feel like you're being useful. You don't have to do anything like of significance, but just a project to work on. Whether it be cleaning your apartment or your house or taking out the garbage or just a project to keep to. Um, is really good for people's mental health to really have like a goal and focus and to feel some sort of importance. At the end of it, maybe you have something to show for it, maybe some you don't. But I think that a project is definitely a key thing to focus on for mental illness. Um, and kind of like tying into that with that, my question to you is: do you have any current photo projects, or do you not care for them? Do you find them like a kind of a nuisance or like debilitating? Don't let you have like creative freedom, because if you've got like a project, then you're kind of like focused on that project. You can't do other things.
Um,
Like
yeah,
yeah, like for me, I don't know. I think projects are cool, but I've ADD, so I have a problem like focusing on a project. I start one thing and I like start doing it, and then I'm like, I'll try this over here, and then I do that, and then I'm like, that worked for a little bit. No, okay, I'll go over here and do this, and it's like, all right, well, that didn't really work out. So I end up having like multiple, I got like handfuls of projects, but nothing are like, you know, None of them are meaty. They're not like they don't have girth to them. I don't know if that's the proper word,
Mm,
but
mm, mm.
they don't have substance. That's the word, substance. They don't have substance.
Yeah, I think it goes for everyone, for anyone who's doing something creative. Um, it's very difficult, I think, for a lot of people, including myself, to say that I have this particular goal, uh, and I start doing it, but then it just kind of, you know, just kind of disappears, or it merges into something different, or you completely just disregard it because you think it's not. I guess the thing we're looking for is a worth. So is it going to be? It doesn't necessarily have to be financial worth, but is it worth something at the end of it? Is there something that we can do with it? Um, is it just going to be published online? Are you going to print a book? Are you going to print just regular prints and look at them? What is I guess the most important thing is to create an ultimate goal for what you want to do with the project. Um, and I've done that a couple of times in how many years I've done photography. 12, 14 years. I've maybe completed only two or three projects. And have they broken barriers? No, they've barely made a dent, right? So then you kind of get into this negative cycle of, well, if I start this project and spend all this time, energy, and money on it, is it worth it? Is it worth doing it? And I think it's important to tell yourself that it is, whatever the cost. I think it is worth it, because if you don't reach your millions of followers on Instagram, I think personally it's worth it because it lets you grow as a person or as an artist, and you can then determine what your strengths and weaknesses are in regards from what has happened with project. Um, so currently, I do have a project in mind. Again, that's something that I do a lot. I have a lot of things that I want to do. They're on the horizon, but I never pull the trigger, I guess. Um, but I guess this one I have to because I want to do I want to do something along the lines of documenting where I'm living for the year. So I'm only here for another 8 months, 7, 8 months. So if I do want to do something with it, I better start soon. And when the end of June comes, I'm out of here. So then I missed my opportunity if I didn't do it. So I guess that's a way of forcing myself to start it.
It's a constraint. Yeah, like that's always been my problem. It's like I got the same process where I think about it and I'm like, that seems like a really great idea. And then my problem is that I talk about it so much that I end up just talking about it to the point where I talk it into existence, and then I just
Yes.
say, "Hey, I've just talked about it. And this is the project that I want to do," but never actually do it because I've talked about it so much into existence that it just feels real, but it's not, or it feels like it's actually there and it's not. I don't know if you have that same like kind of mentality.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Especially when you talk about it or you tell someone, an immediate family member or your partner, your wife, husband, whatever. Once you tell them, I feel like it loses, like it goes into the void. It's just, I feel like it's probably better not to mention it at all. Um,
It seems so weird to like not talk
yeah.
about a project, right? Because you see these like creatives saying, "Oh yeah, I'm really working on this project of like this avant-garde look of a model," and you're like, "All right, cool, yeah, it's kind of weird, but." And then, 6 months later, they've got this photo project done, and it's in a book, and it's selling like 100 million copies, New York Times bestseller. Like, okay, what the heck happened? Why doesn't my brain work the same way?
Yeah, and I guess I have particular, my personality, I guess I'm a bit more conservative in the way that I think about all of the risks and the the consequences that can occur, the negative consequences that can occur if I do something. So I guess a good example is something that I did yesterday. Um, there, if if we have listeners that don't live in Canada, we have this huge highway that crosses the entire country called Trans Canada Highway, and it comes all the way to Newfoundland.
I've heard of it. I've heard of it.
You've heard of the TCH, as Newfoundlanders refer to it, the TCH. So I need to take this highway in order to get to where I work. So there is this particular area on the TCH in eastern Newfoundland where it's called the Isthmus, and this particular part of land is the piece of land that connects the Avalon Peninsula to the rest of the island. It's a very, very thin piece of land where in a particular place on the isthmus, you could actually see um, the ocean on both sides. So on one side you can see Trinity Bay, and on the other side you can see Placentia Bay, which is pretty neat. So if you're lucky enough to go through this piece of land and not hit fog, which is the most there's hardly anyone living on this piece of land. Fog is a lot more frequent than people. You can actually climb up this place called the Rock Cut, as Newfoundlanders would call it, and from that altitude, you can see both sides of the ocean, or the ocean from both sides of the piece of land. So yeah, in my thinking, I said I can't do that because I have to pull on the side of the highway, and this is our major highway. People are going, 100 to 120 kilometers an hour or faster, and it's a risk. You can get hurt if you do this, and then you have to climb this huge rock. And then I don't think I have to worry about it, but I'm worried about coyotes, and there's definitely no coyotes up there. But I did it on Sunday evening, and it was worth it, right? Because the sunset was unbelievable, and I was able to capture that moment without the fog. But it was bloody cold, it was dangerous, and not to do this at home, I walked across the TCH, which is not recommended. But I had to, because I had to get to the other side to avoid this darn power line that was in the way. So at the end of the day, you do these things without even thinking about them. So I think that's the better way. Just do it.
Think about it, just do it. Yeah, I think it's a good way to obviously be careful. Don't do crazy things at home. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that the best way to like do something or like flesh something out, if you've got an idea, is just to do it and to act on it versus just to talk about it. And I think you're right. I think that's part of my problem is I just talk about it so much that I talk it into existence and then I just don't do it. So I think you're right. I think I just have to shut my mouth and do it.
Yeah, and like for me, it was inspiring because the week before I had driven through this land again, like as I do every week, and I spotted the most amazing, sunset I had ever seen. So I said, well, next Sunday, if it's the conditions are similar, I'm going to stop and do it. Which just because I was so inspired by the scene, I guess landscape, whatever. I guess it's kind of the thing I do the most of the time. That's one of the things with landscape photography. You have to wait it out. In this case, I had to wait a week in order to get that. Did I get the exact thing I was looking for? No, but I'll have many other opportunities to try that without killing myself by crossing the TCH.
In the entire time that you were like during the week, did you like have the idea in your head? You're like, I'm gonna walk across the highway. I'm gonna take the photo. And then like 20, 30 minutes later, nah, it's a silly idea. I'm not gonna do it. I'll just go to this other part where there's no danger, there's no rocks, there's no coyotes, there's no like mountains of traffic. And like, I'm just gonna not do that. I'm gonna photograph from this, and it's gonna be just the same. And then like you do that about like 9 times a day for an entire week. Did you ever like have that thought process in your head?
Oh yeah, like the whole week, because I knew that it was a dangerous area. Asking a bunch of people, hey, the rock cut, is there anywhere you can stop? And thankfully there is. There's like a little dirt road that goes up to a radio tower, so you have a little bit of leg room there. So yeah, of course, yeah. Every day goes through your mind. You're asking people, should I do it? Should I? Is this stupid? Is this too dangerous? Is the shot going to come out the way that I'm seeing it in my mind? And then you come up with the well, I don't have the appropriate gear to do it. I need this particular lens, etc.,
Oh, that's
etc.
the worst. That's the worst conversation to have with yourself. It was like, do I have the right gear? It's like, never ask yourself that question.
No, it's not. Like
It's the worst.
with all of the gear that we've acquired in the last decade, like you shouldn't have to ask that question, but you still do, and you think about the photographers that have the lenses that you want, and it's just like a constant. Yeah, it's just it never stops. It's too bad.
Well, you know what? Like, I think I appreciate your insight on that because it's really, for me, I've struggled with that for years to, have an idea for a project and then, follow through with it.
Yeah. So, what's a recent project that you may have wanted to do, but you just didn't get off the ground?
um, I wanted to photograph during the summertime. I kind of did a little bit of this. Uh, there's a couple of images on my website, uh, um, and the images are of like driveways in my neighborhood or around my neighborhood. Like I live, so the part of
Mm.
Ottawa that I live in, I'll just give you like a visual of it a little bit. I live sort of near Chinatown, near the Glebe. It's called the Glebe Annex, and basically it's I'm stuck between a highway and the Glebe is like sort of like the bougie high class part of town that's like very much about appearances. And I live near Chinatown, which is very much about like don't care what the place looks like, but the food tastes amazing.
Mm.
So it's a very like stark contrast between the two, and then you've got the highway that runs through the downtown part of it. And I live in that area, and there's a lot of homes that were built either in the 20s, 30s, and a lot of homes in the 40s and 50s. So they're like World War or they're war era homes, I guess is what they would be called. And they have these
Yeah.
huge driveways in comparison to every other place that you know downtown, where there's like such little land. And I found that the actual I don't know. I found that the way they looked, they just looked uh, interesting. Um, I don't know. I had this like idea in my mind that they looked uh, kind of different, and somebody hadn't photographed them before, and I kind of just liked the way they looked, and so I just started to photograph like people's houses and their driveways. And I found that um, I don't know. I guess I thought I'd create like a project of like people's highway of their driveways and stuff. And I just stopped, and I don't know why. I just stopped taking pictures of people's driveways. And now like for myself, like I'm really focusing on like taking pictures around my neighborhood. I think I've kind of like created this as a project that I'm just doing, but I'm not putting like a lot of effort into it. But maybe I'm hoping something will come out of it. Um, but I think the part that I struggle with the most, and you probably can uh, talk about this, or maybe you can't. Um, but I have a problem with sticking to a theme for photos. I try like different ways of editing and photographing. I feel like I have such a wide range of images, but they also have a wide range of look and feel. And I don't stick to one look. I don't know if it's because I get like I have ADD. I don't know if I get bored of one look and I want to try something else, or I'll shoot in color, I'll shoot black and white.
Mm.
Like I've tried to challenge myself to shoot all black and white for a month, but then I was just like, nah, I don't want to do that because then I come across something that I want to shoot in color, and I get bored. Um, so I
Mhm.
don't know. Like you've probably come across that at some point. I think we've talked about that in the
Yeah,
past.
yeah, not just like your editing style, but also the type of photography that you're pursuing. Um, yeah, there's always a time where, yeah, I'm a landscape photographer. That's what I do. I love it. You get to be outdoors. You just get to look at the scene and take it all in, and then you get to a point where it just gets kind of it's always the same, not the same
Attention.
scene, but the same location. And then you get to a point where, okay, every other photographer here is doing the same thing, but they're doing it in a little bit of a different way. The style is a bit different. Okay, it ends up being a little bit better than yours, and then you kind of just quit. And then you go off the street, or you do something completely different. Um, so yeah, I think the biggest uh, thing to discipline is probably the one factor here, where if you look at the ones that are successful online, at least in the social media sphere, they do have a consistent theme. They have a consistent color palette, um, and that I think takes discipline for putting all of your work within that umbrella and never trying something different or new. But they do end up doing something different and new within their theme. So I think that's what makes them successful. That's what they say. They say, like on Instagram, you should have a similar theme across your feed. So I'm not sure if we just want to try all the different things. We should stick to one thing. Um, that might be your mistake.
It's one of those things where oh man, yeah, you're right. It's discipline. It's total discipline, and like just like focusing on something, but like not talking about it. And yeah, it's such a hard concept to sometimes to think about and to do, and to like really narrow down a look and a feel. Like I've come across I know those pages that you're talking about where they like you actually turned me on to this couple that lives in Newfoundland. They have a helicopter. What's their name? Chris and
Oh yes, Becky and Chris. Yeah,
yeah, Becky and Chris,
yeah.
and they definitely have a look um, for their images for sure, and their whole feel is like very like dark and moody. It's very much like Peter McKinnon, I find in a lot of ways. Um, and I like it, but I'm like, I don't know if I could shoot like that every day, like to have all my images look like that. I'm like to me, it doesn't. I don't know. It's just not me. You know what I mean? But I do like to shoot black and white a lot because I feel like it really helps you
Mm,
focus on the subject matter. Um,
mm,
I feel like it's simpler. It's a lot easier. Sometimes it can be very beautiful. Sometimes it can be very ugly. Sometimes too busy. Black and white. If it's too busy, it's like it's really hard to pay attention. But um, so yeah, I think for myself, it's just trying to figure out like a look and feel. I think I've got something going on for photographs that I've been doing, kind of a quasi project. I don't want to talk about it because like I kind of was sort of like that mind thought, but or mind. I don't know, I guess not a theory, but like the idea of like not talking about something into existence because then you just won't do it. But I've also been
mm,
photographing the town that my parents moved to this year, which is Kempville, um,
mm.
and it's I take walks around there when I can when I'm visiting, and I've been photographing different parts of the town and different areas and different scenes, and it really has inspired me to really do more photography here in Ottawa. Because I got into a bit of a rut, and even when getting a new camera, I was still in a rut where I just couldn't seem to get out of it. Um, and then I took a walk in the town of Kempville, which is just about 30 minutes outside of Ottawa, and I really kind of like found my groove again. I found the spark, the joy to take pictures, and I really like the look of it.
Great.
It's an old town. It's got some old feel to it. I'm still looking for some older buildings in that town to take pictures of, and some. I haven't found the industrial part of the town yet, but I don't think it exists anymore. There used to be an industrial part of the town, but yeah. But yeah, I think for me, I'm photographing that town for what reason? I don't know. I just feel like it's an interesting town. I've never been there before. I haven't seen too many people photograph it, so I feel like there's a hole that I can do or a void that I can fill.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's always voids that you can fill. I guess it's similar to what I want to do with where I'm currently at. It's a little town called Clarenville, a couple hours west of St. John's. I mean, it's a combination of a bunch of different little towns. So you have Clarenville, you have Shoal Harbor, you have Milton, Georges Brook. So those would be the four main communities that are all kind of connected together. How many people are you talking about? Like less than 10,000. So it's a very small area. But again, it's not to insult anyone from here, but it is kind of a drive-through type of town where there's a major gas stop, and as people are crossing the island, this is kind of like the last Tim Hortons for a while. So you have to get off the highway to get into the town. So not a lot of people just stop here and stay here overnight. It's probably very different in the summer because it is a very beautiful area. There's a lot of nature. You're near a lot of very hot spots like Bonavista, for example. So it could be thriving in the summertime. I've just driven through it all the time, and I think that's what the majority of the people do. So I think I could be filling a void there as well.
It's funny. I'm going to give this one to you just because it just kind of popped into my head. Uh, you said it's kind of like a drive-through town, right?
Hmm.
Why don't you create a project? Again, you don't have to. I just kind of like just jumped out of my head. I'm like, why don't you photograph all the drivers in the town?
But like the restaurant drive-throughs?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. There's actually for such a small town, there's a high concentration of fast food restaurants.
right. So like it's it's just kind of like the drive-through town. Photograph all the drive-throughs and call it the
Yeah.
drive-through town like zine or whatever. I don't know. It just kind of like popped in my head.
It's amazing because there's less than 7,000 people in Clarenville, and you could easily open up a second McDonald's, and you would not lose any money.
It's funny you say that because when I'm in Kempville, speaking of restaurants, I don't want to get too much into the topic of this, but it's funny in small towns. The moment you get off the highway from 416 on the way to Kempville, there's Tim Hortons. If you drive another like 10 minutes down the road, there's another Tim Hortons at the other end of the stretch road. I'm like, why are there two Tim Hortons in small towns? There's also two McDonald's. There's a McDonald's in the Walmart, and there's a McDonald's at the other end of the town. It's very funny.
And it's the same. It's actually the same thing here in Clarenville on Manitoba Drive, which is like kind of the main fast food Clarenville Mall. It's kind of the main drag. There's a Tim Hortons there, and just 5 minutes up on the highway, there's another Tim Hortons.
It's funny. So all those things I just listed in the last statistic in 2016 for the population of Kempville, there's 3,911 people.
Wow, it's even smaller in Clarenville. That's sad. Yeah.
Exactly. Like it's so funny. Like how many restaurants there were. Like I was so shocked they have a Starbucks. There was A&W. There's KFC. There's also all the Bub and Pop little restaurants that are there as well. There's like there's an Independent. There's like which is a grocery store. There's a Food Basics, which is a grocery store. There's a Walmart, which is everyone knows is a grocery store ish. There's like so many different like grocery stores, but the one that I go to when I'm there, along with the one that my parents go to, is a mom and pop. It's called B&H grocery store. They've got local cuts of meat, local cuts of breads and stuff like that. So uh, it's surprising to see like a local grocery store like that thrive in a small town. But anyways, I digress. Uh, but yeah, it's so interesting to see like such a small population of people with such dense like fast food joints. It's kind of crazy. Maybe there's a project there. I don't know. Maybe I'll do it. Maybe you'll do it. Maybe
Maybe.
somebody else will do it. If there's a world of alternate universes, the book's already been created then.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's probably similar across the country, but Newfoundland is a few large towns on the highway onto the way to St. John's. Like, there's not much um, between Port aux Basques to St. John's. So the highway is what creates the economy in these little towns because there ain't much else. But uh, but the thing is that I've been thinking about that I've been here for nearly 2.5 months is that once you talk to the locals, you start knowing more and more about the town, why people like to live here, and the certain activities that you can do and that you didn't know because you were just simply driving through all the time. There are entire tourism sectors that are in this little town. Like for example, there's a really cool activity that you can do from a person that provides it. Um, if no one knows anything about Newfoundland, there was a little bit of a history about it where some of the communities had to be resettled because they were only accessible by boat. So they forced to resettle a lot of these people into larger centers. So it would be because it's a very expensive upkeep for the government to provide services to these communities. But there's an abandoned community on a large island near Clarenville called Random Island, and there's a little abandoned community at the end of it called Deer Harbor. I think that's what it's called. So there's a couple here that provide a service where you take a boat out of Hickman's Harbor, which is maybe like the largest community on Random Island, and they take you to Deer Harbor, where they've purchased a couple of cabins, and you stay there overnight. So you're really isolated. You're in a place where there's like no roads, and the only way in and out is from by boat. So there's lots of little secrets that you learn just from talking to the locals. Is there anything like similar like that in Kempville or any other towns?
I've fully discovered yet. There is this place a little bit outside where um there's the train runs near Kempville, but it goes through, I believe it goes through this place called Oxford Mills. Um and it's kind of divided in two sections. So I haven't fully explored that place. It's a place I want to explore. But I would imagine there's some history there because those rails really haven't changed in the last, I don't know, let's say 50 years, 30, 50 years, I would believe. Um, because as we know, Canada's rail system is quite ancient and is federally owned, which doesn't make for advancements quite that great, unfortunately. So it's definitely probably something to look into for sure, because there probably is something like that where um, there was probably a cargo train or lumber train or whatever going through Oxford Mills or Oxford Station at some point, and then that went away due to the fact that those industries either moved elsewhere or it became cheaper to produce elsewhere, or there was other means to transport it, like by a truck. Um, and that probably made the town shrink in its size and had an industry completely disappear. So it's definitely something for me to look into for sure. Um, you know, there's definitely smaller towns that have kind of like disappeared, but they disappeared decades ago. Um, and I think it's due to the fact that the climate is so harsh in this in the valley. It's just so cold that people just can't survive. Long ago in
Mm-hmm.
the early 1900s.
Actually, a thought that I could add to your driveway project. Um, well, you probably know this better than I do because you're from this area, I think, Vanier. Um, there's actually, I came across this because my brother was going to rent an apartment in this area. There's a street in Vanier, I think it's off Beechwood, where there's a bunch of little houses that were built during wartime. Um, and they're all very unique looking because the other residential area around that street is was not built for wartime. So these little houses are very unique.
Beechwood, you said?
Sorry.
You said it's near Beechwood?
Yeah, it's off Beechwood as you're going like more east, like away from downtown. Um,
Right.
uh, yes, and on Beechwood there's that old church that's now turning into a condo, I think.
Oh,
Um, so that area there, and you turn right if you're going towards like east of Orleans, let's say. If you turn right, I think there's a couple of streets there that have these really tiny homes. They look like almost like doll homes. Like they're kind of cute, but they're very
like
unique.
out of place almost. Okay,
Yeah, because you
interesting.
don't see anything like that. I've never seen anything like that in Ottawa in any of the neighborhoods I've been into.
I'll have to look into that.
Yeah, so you could maybe add that as a layer to your driveway project.
For the listeners out there, I'll have to probably bring somebody to come with me because it's a bit of a sketchy area.
Bring a photo buddy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, please. Just a little PSA. If you're going out taking pictures, bring somebody with you at either at night or uh, just bring somebody with you. It's always good photographing pairs, socially distanced, obviously, but yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, outside Canada, people probably think there's no sketchy areas in Canada, but there are.
It definitely has. There are definitely sketchy areas, and it's definitely increased for sure. I know the city due to the fact of the pandemic for sure. People have become uh, more agitated due to the fact of less people being downtown, less handouts, less. There's so much less. It's not even funny. So people have become desperate in a lot of areas, unfortunately, and they've unfortunately turned to either violence or muggings, or it's really unfortunate. But yeah, it's definitely just better off to be safe than sorry. Photographing in with people and don't go out at night alone. If you do, make it short. Tell somebody where you're going, and have insurance. Just a little PSA.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, definitely in a bigger city like that, you want to be careful.
Well, you know what? I think for the first podcast, I think this was a good run. I think it was very, very much informative on both our parts. We talked about a wide range of things, uh, and I'm pretty sure next time we'll be able to focus it down to something more concrete. But it was a good first run. I'll try and edit it. I'm gonna make it full length. I'm not gonna edit what we say, obviously. So it's gonna be an unedited podcast. But I'm gonna try and make like an outro of music somehow, and maybe an intro with music. Um, but I think the podcast. I think this went very well. Um, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's good. Talking about a variety of topics, down to public health concerns, to the economy, to philosophy, to mental health, to creative outlets. So I think we touched on a lot of different issues, different topics, which is great. And if anyone wants to add in, that's fantastic. I guess I could start, and you can end it. I guess. Oh, the the cheesy. Where can you find us? Bit.
Where are you, Mark? Where are you? Like, where's Waldo?
Yeah, and I don't even know why I'm saying this. Like I'm on social media.
It'll
But
come
we,
natural. I guess it'll come natural to us in terms of like, if we make this a regular thing, it'll become more natural. Like, hey, you can just find me on Instagram or
yeah,
here's my website. If you want to follow me on Twitter and see my issues and virtues with my children, I express them
yeah,
sort of on there. But
yeah. Like I mean, you know where to find photographers, and um, you just have to do Mark with a C, Surge, NL, and you'll find me in most avenues like Instagram and Tumblr and Visco and Twitter and the whole 9 yards.
yeah, that's kind of it's funny. You've made yours very uniform in terms of like it being all the same, which is something I didn't do because I was like either somebody had something similar or I just created it too late and I never thought about it. But tried to come with something unique. But you can find me on Instagram at Alex Boone Photo. Is it Alex Boone Photo or is it A Boone Photo? Geez, see, that's not my problem. I don't know what it is. It's Alex
Stick
Boone
to
Photo.
yeah,
It's
A
Alex
Boone
Boone Photo.
Photo.
Yeah,
Oh, it's Alex Boone Photo. Okay.
it's Alex Boone Photo. You see what I mean? It's so my website is aboonephoto.com. So you can find me there, and on Twitter, which is just sort of like a shameless plug. You can find me at Alex Boone Photo as well. All right, so I kept it somewhat consistent. But yeah, that's where you can find me. That's where you can find Mark. Hopefully, you enjoy our podcast. It won't be the last for sure. Right, keep to a schedule. I'm not talking this into existence. I promise. I want to do it.
No, and no, I think like an hour or more, whatever, and for at least once a week or something to keep consistently, and maybe even have some others on here sometimes.
Yeah, I think the next one's definitely gonna be shorter for sure because we got a lot of like the necessary stuff that we need to talk about, like the pandemic and who we are, what we are, and that's the other way we could just easily go into the next podcast without talking about any of that stuff, and just talk about our lives and how photography is shaping it and how our photography is being shaped by our lives. So yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much for listening to our podcast and listening to me ramble on and on and on, talk for hours.
Um, yeah, thank you as well. And again, we're just, I guess the most important thing is we're just two very normal guys who have, regular jobs, families, but just love to get out there, film our digital cameras, and try to capture anything we can.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.